Back on the RJ Young Show, Mayberry on the ones and twos. I'm assuming Spencer Rattler's going to win the quarterback derby between he and Tanner Mordecai, and that would mean that he gets his first opportunity to start at quarterback for Oklahoma. Now, this is interesting because Rattler was the number one quarterback in the 2019 class, but he didn't really play much of anything. He had 7 of 11 passes, man, mostly in garbage time. All, quite honestly, in garbage time. And as we continue to look at what he might be getting himself into, I want to take a look at the rest of the class that got opportunities to start because it's a precocious class. Either they were the best player at the time or they were the player that eventually elevated. So South Carolina's Ryan Hilinski, right, was rated the 4th best quarterback in the class, ended up taking over the job permanently in the second game of the season, where he completed 24 of 30 passes for 282 yards with 2 touchdowns and a pick against Charleston Southern. But he also threw for 324 passing yards, and completed 36 of 57 against Alabama the next week, so he could play. Still didn't finish that great. 58% completion rate, a 113.4 passer rating, and just 2,300 yards passing, but also throw in there the signature win against Georgia in Sanford. That's a big deal. Hank Bachmeier, Boise State, 6'2", 201 prospect, was going to go to UCLA. Then Jim Mora got fired, ends up at Boise State. Had a really great game against Florida State, yes. And a come-from-behind win, 36-31, with 407 yards passing. He was banged up most of the season, played 8 games, but in 4 of those games, threw for more than 250 yards or more, and 9 touchdowns, 6 interceptions that season. Max Duggan, you know about, got progressively better as the season wore on, beat out graduate transfer quarterback out of Kansas State, Alex Delton, right? 19 of 27 passes for 273 yards. In a game against number 15 Texas that they won, 37-27. Yeah, you remember that he went for 92 yards on 12 carries against Oklahoma in Norman. One of those went for like 60 yards. And then Bo Nix, who is the number 2 rated quarterback in this class, started for Auburn. Got a big win against Oregon. Got a big win against number 17 A&M. And then number 5 Alabama. But nobody would have looked at Bo Nix last year and said he was a great quarterback. 57.6% completion rate, 2,500 yards passing, 16 passing touchdowns, 6 picks. Didn't really throw for 300 yards more than once. Most of what he was averaging about 180 yards passing a game in Gus Malzahn's offense, which is an indictment because they throw the ball deep so often. They run the ball, but they throw the ball deep. And then one of the kids that I was so surprised and I think had one of the best seasons of any quarterback across the country was Jaden Daniels out of Arizona State. 3,000-yard passer, 17 touchdowns to just 2 interceptions. Completed passes for at least 300 yards or more in 5 games last year and led the Sun Devils to signature wins against number 18 Michigan State, number 15 California, and of course, number 6 Oregon. And then the best true freshman last year at quarterback and one of the best true freshman displays that we have seen, quite honestly, ever was from Sam Howell at North Carolina. ACC Offensive Rookie of the Year, 49 of 60 votes he got for that. Passed for a record 3,641 yards, along with 38 passing touchdowns in his freshman season. Put that in perspective. Those are the 3rd most passing touchdowns in a season in ACC history behind former Heisman winner Jameis Winston and national champion Deshaun Watson. So there's a range here of about between 2,300 yards at the bottom. I'm not going to really include Hank Bachmeier for playing 8 games because I think he would have got there if he'd have played 12. And then at the top end, we're looking at a Sam Howell with 3,600 yards passing. Most people would tell you that they expect Rattler to be a 4,000-yard passer in Riley's offense. I also expect him to outperform all of these guys that he was rated higher than, because he's just a better player on paper, and he was a better player coming out of high school. Sam Howell is actually getting fringe Heisman candidacy, but he plays at North Carolina, and that's kind of the thing there. But looking at what Rattler could be and looking at what these guys are, I think it's going to be interesting because then you got to factor in things like how big a deal is it for Rattler to have been able to sit that year, whereas all of these players played as true freshmen. You know, his first year as a starter is probably going to be better than their first year as a starter just by being able to sit and watch for a year, to say nothing of watching Jalen Hurts work for a year. And I'm just going to go ahead and say Lincoln Riley is a better quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator than Phil Longo at North Carolina. And, you know, then Gus on right now, man. I mean, maybe Jarrett Stidham will make him look good, the Patriots, this year. But I'm trying to think of the last guy that needed Gus Malzahn, like needed him, might have been David Johnson at the University of Tulsa. Cam Newton did not need Gus Malzahn to be great. Max Duggan, I think, was good in spite of his offense in some ways, but he also doesn't have a Jalen Reagor, who I thought was good. Sewu Olanalua, he was good. Darius Anderson was also good. They also had a 6'8" tight end that I was like, or 6'6" tight end. And I was like, why don't they just throw that guy the ball more? And then Helinski, I think, was the only guy for which didn't have a whole lot to work with at wide receiver, but he did have Rico Dowdle and Tavian Feaster at running back. Riley's going to inherit an offensive line that's played a lot of football, but not necessarily an offensive line that the offensive line coach is enthusiastic about or the head coach is enthusiastic about, because even going into spring practice, one of the things that Riley had touched on is how much better he needs the offensive line to be. Jaden Hazelwood has talent, but you know, he has the same opportunity, or he's had more opportunities than Rattler has to play. So I expect him to be a little bit further along, but sometimes I look at that backfield and I think if Rattler cannot dump the ball off to good backs, how much are people going to just forget that they're there? How much is Jeremiah Hall going to contribute to his success? How much is Kennedy Brooks going to have to actually catch the ball out of the backfield? Will Marcus Major be ready to go? You know, can TJ Pledger become the guy that we all thought he was when he played in the U.S. Army All-American Bowl? Interesting to look at. But Mayberry, I want to bring you in here, and do you think it's fair to compare Rattler to Heisman winners or to the guys in his class?